So don't see him next week. Come see me. And no, I don't know yet. I don't know if Reef Dog's got someone to talk to next week, but if not, it's likely that it will be me. But I just thought, if he's away, I'll he obviously doesn't love you enough to keep to do it today while he's away. So I thought I'll show you some love and do it for him. But the reason this video has come about, no guest next week. I have a subject in mind. I'm not sure what that could mean. Normally, when you say it could be me, but we shall see. The reason I decided to do this live stream, and I'll be honest with you, I am not as professional as some of the other live streamers, and I just thought that this is a question that I get asked quite often. And then while I was looking at some of the corals yesterday, I was looking at one of my Electus mushrooms, and if you follow me on Instagram, you'll know that I just put a picture out, a post out of them. And I bought an Electus mushroom a little while ago, a few months ago, and they're quite expensive to buy. But for whatever reason, this Electus mushroom within probably 3 or 4 months it's given me 3 baby Electus mushrooms. So the mother was 250, and if you think about it, in 3 months I've had 3 babies, and the 3 babies I'm selling for 150. One of them is definitely much nicer than the others. It's one of them's got a really, really thick red band compared to the rest of them, which have the other 2 have to color up a little bit, because they are they're like a fine wine, Electus mushrooms and jawbreakers. It takes a little while for the colors to come out in them, especially jawbreakers. Jawbreakers can take a long time, and that's why they're so expensive, for the red to come out. And the longer you have them for, usually the more red there is. And the color of the mother does make a difference with regards to the babies. So the 3 babies I've just got, one of them's got a thick red band, and the other 2 have got hardly any red on them at all, just little speckles. So that thick red one will come out, in theory, should get better and better all the time. And so while I was, while I was looking at them, I pretty regularly get a message from people saying, well, what are the best corals if I want to start a coral farm? Or how do I start making money from my fish tank like what you're doing? And it's difficult to get back to everyone. So I'll be honest with you, most messages that come to me, I don't have time to reply to. But I thought I might as well just do it all in one go today. And I'll take you back all the way to when I was probably 17 was when I very, very first got my tank. So I had no money at all when I was 17. I got my first job, and then I decided I want a reef tank. So now reef tanks, obviously, they're not cheap to run. So it was I wanted to think as quickly as possible how I could start generating money from the tank. And what you see here has basically been paid for by doing things like this over the years. So the very first thing that I did was I've got a sore throat today. Now, I was obviously just been on a plane myself, so hopefully I haven't got the coronavirus, but maybe the wine will help, because I was just in Spain. So you had a choice today. I was going to put a video out today or do a live stream, and I thought I will do a video because then I can do some coral frags. So my voice is a bit croaky, as I said. We never know, but I've just been. I went on a plane with probably 200 people. So yeah. Hello, the wall is burning. Not sure what that means. Anyway, so the very, very first thing I did, and I'm not actually sure if this is still possible or this works. When I was 17 or just under 18, what I did is, so I set the tank up and I worked out that the TDS of the water that was at the shop was, I think, between 15 and 30. So I thought to myself, well, I bought an RO unit, and I started to produce water, which obviously was 0 TDS, which is obviously very desirable for people. Now, if you've only got one source of water and you're going to the fish shop and the fish shop isn't providing you with a TDS of 0, then what can you do? You have a choice. You can either buy your own RO unit, or you can try and find water from elsewhere. Now, no one else was selling water at the time, so I had literally I didn't have a choice of getting it elsewhere. So what I did is I bought an RO unit, and then I realized my parents, because I was living with my parents at the time, weren't on a water meter, which means it didn't matter how much water we use. And even if you are on a water meter, water generally is so cheap in comparison to what the shops sell it for. So in theory, this might still work, I believe. But if you're producing RO with a 0 TDS, I put it on some of the forums. I think I put it on Ultra Reef, and I also put it on Acris Classified. And I had so many people. In the end, I couldn't keep up with production for my tank, as well as I think I had like between 20 and 30 customers. And what they would do is they would come and they would drop off water. They'd drop off the empty barrels, say on a Monday, and then on a Thursday, because I had a van at the time, I would fill up all the barrels between Monday and Thursday, put them all in the back of the van, and then drive around for an hour, dropping them off at everyone's house. Now, for that hour, I could make between 60 and 100 pounds, which at the time, once a week, for a 17-year-old or an 18-year-old that had like very little disposable income, it was guilt-free spending. So it was brilliant for me, because if I wanted to buy a coral which cost £100, it didn't hurt, because I essentially had made the money for free, if you see what I mean, from doing the water. So, as I said, I don't know if that still works. I am thinking about doing it again here, because obviously I have to make the RO water for the coral farm is 0 TDS, and I have to make it as 0 TDS. So why would local people not want to? And then it gives them incentive to come and get water, and it gives them an incentive to have a look at the corals at the same time. So I am thinking about doing it again. If it'll work from your home, I don't know, because before, obviously, I did it when I wasn't on a water meter. So essentially the water was free. Most houses these days are on a water meter, but an extra sort of 140 to £400 a month for a fish tank was not too bad at the time. So that was obviously a long time ago that I was doing that, but it worked for me, and in theory it could work for you as well. That is doing it that way. You want a very small amount, but you have to have a lot of people to do it for, and to some extent it might not it might not be worth the effort for someone who is earning a reasonable amount of money, if you see what I mean. So if you're reasonably new to the hobby and you want a way to pay for your tank, and you've got an RO unit already, it's not a bad idea for you. In the reef shop I worked at, the manager washed his dirty dreads in the mixed salt water. Nice. So there you go. There's an example. That is a perfect example why you want to make your own water, or better, make other people's water. And again, you can buy the salt yourself, and you can put a markup on the salt, and you can sell that to fellow reefers. And as long as the water is as pure as you say it is, and you can prove it to them, then there's no reason for them not to keep coming back to you. Now, if you aren't making your own RO water, this is what I will say now to you. Firstly, if you don't want an RO unit yourself, that's completely fine. Not everyone wants one. But what I would do is buy a TDS meter. They cost about £3. You can get them off eBay. Take them to the fish shop and test the TDS of their water, and then decide if you want to have your own RO unit. And as I said, once you've got one, it will pay for itself eventually. So that was the first thing I did. Then after that, I got into I'm not sure which came first. I worked out that you could make they're sort of these three all sort of come together. So you can breed coral, or you can grow coral. You can breed fish. It is possible. It is time consuming, but on a small scale, it definitely can be profitable. And the other thing that people don't realize, and they do it themselves, is you can breed invertebrates. So, Reef Dog, thank you very much. Deposit for the first batch of prestige water. Thank you very much. I look forward to dropping off your house. So, It's I don't think I've ever had it. I know I have had a few super chats before, but never one from such a famous person. So he'll ask for that back next week, or next week I'll have to send him the £10 back during our live stream. But I know why Reef Dog's on there, just for everyone, so everyone knows. It is incredibly time consuming having a channel, and although I don't do it to the same extent as many other people do it anymore, Reef Dog really does do it properly, and it takes up a huge amount of his time. And when people do a super chat like that, it makes a difference. It does. So whether it's me or whether it's Reef Dog or whether it's anyone else, especially if it's Reef Dog, because he's just done it for me, you should do it, because if you tune in every single week and he sits there boring you for 2 hours, and sometimes, my God, is it boring, especially when I'm on it. It's just nice to have some appreciation back. And as I promise you, this isn't for me. So this I'm not saying this for me. I'm saying this purely because obviously I use my channel now as an advertising platform more than a YouTube channel. But if it's just someone who specifically does a YouTube channel, then it's nice for them to have some appreciation. So as I said, Reef Dog, thank you very much, and I'm sure I will give it straight back to you next week. So. Right, now where was I? So on this journey, so as I said, I started off by selling RO water, and then I gradually got into fish and corals. Fish were first, although I didn't start breeding them first. It was actually the corals, the first thing I actually started selling was turbo snails. So again, small amounts, but they breed themselves, and if you take them out, they will keep breeding. If you don't take out the babies, they stop. That it's not that they don't stop breeding. There's not enough algae for everything. So eventually the population stabilizes. So if you regularly remove sections, like 10 or 5 or 10 of them to sell them, it's not a huge amount of money, but it's better than nothing. And if you're just trying to pay for your RO water, or you're just trying to pay for your electricity bill now, then it's worth doing. And so I was selling turbo snails, and interestingly, I was selling dove snails as well. Those of you who don't know what dove snails they are, they're these little tiny. They're almost like cowrie snails, I think, but they're like little tiny versions. Some people like them, some people don't like them. And the other thing was starfish, little bristle starfish. People would buy them. It was insane to me that people were buying essentially what came free in the tank, and it was like the cleanup crew. Dove snails can be a pest to some people, but as I said, if they're a pest, that means you can grow plenty of them. They're not particularly invasive, so if anything that you can grow loads of and the people will buy, start selling it. Now again, I'm going to start on the very, very small scale stuff, and the biggest part of this will be the corals, because obviously that is where the most money can be made. So after that, there was I've never done this myself, but I know people do, where they sell algae like Calopa, and it's either Catamorpha or Cheetamorpha. I've heard people say it different ways. I've never had a refugium, so I've never owned it myself. But again, people sell clumps of this, and it might only be £5, £10, but it's still to some people that's not worth the hassle. But to other people, if you can sell enough of these small things, you can buy yourself a nice fish, and you don't feel guilty because you bought a flame angel, or you bought not so much anymore. I remember when flame angels was £60, but you could buy almost all of my really, really large expensives, things like my gem tang, and there's a few other things, have been purchased with usually by trading for coral. It sounds insane, because I could sell that coral for an equal amount or even more, but for some reason there just feels something wrong inside me when you're paying £1,000 for a fish. So although they're not £1,000 anymore, they've come down. They're the only thing that has come down in price. So if you look at back over the years, almost all the fish and all the corals have gone up in price, and the one fish which has come down in price is gem tanks. So they are like they really are like the Bitcoin of the fish world, because obviously they were expensive and then they're not expensive anymore so much anyway. Well, at least here they aren't. I think the last time I saw a price of them, they were like £170. When I remember when they were £1,500. So yeah. But speaking obviously of fish, the fish which can be bred in captivity is actually very limited for and there's a lot more effort that's involved. This is probably the thing on my list which you do for love rather than you do because you enjoy it. Basically, yeah, you do it because you enjoy it, not because you do it for the money. The money is sort of that little bit extra. But I myself tried my hand at breeding clownfish. I was not successful at breeding clownfish. I know what to do. I know how to do it. You have to be quite diligent when it comes to breeding clownfish. They start off very, very small, and you have to feed them rotifers then you feed them like newly hatched brine shrimp, which you've fed rotifers. There was a lot of effort in breeding clownfish, and although I did try it once, what I actually found was a better idea was I had a breeding pair of really, really expensive clownfish at the time, and they would lay eggs on a flower pot every month without fail. Every month they would lay eggs on a flower pot, which was in my sump. And because they were like a very rare strain at the time, they were like black ice something phantom, something strange. And there was a cross between that and a completely white platinum clownfish. And because every single month they would lay eggs, someone would buy the pot from me. So again, I think they used to pay, I don't know, between 30 and £50 once a month. They would take the eggs, they would raise them. They obviously would make a lot more than £30 or £40, but there's a risk involved. And in the end, those fish went to a specific breeder. They went to it was a UK-based clownfish farm. So originally he started his garage and he was just buying the pots from me. And then eventually he said, well, just can I buy the pair? And then eventually he set up a huge warehouse. And it's in one of my videos. One of the videos is called 10,000 Fish in One Room. Well, my pet clownfish, my ones, are actually in that video somewhere, along with 10,000 other of them. And it's so you don't have to actually raise them yourself to make money, because there is always someone who is willing to buy something weird as an experiment. And yes, I was amazed when I found someone who was willing to buy them. But again, I just thought, well, I'm not going to raise these myself. So does anyone want to buy the pot? And as I said, every single month without fail. So even if it was £30, that's another £360 a year from that. So there's definitely ways to make money with little effort. If you want to put a lot of effort in, and I'm not sure how the costs work out because you have to have separate tanks and things like that, you can breed clownfish, but I think it's done on such an industrial scale now that unless you've got something particularly rare, I'm not sure that it's definitely, let's put it this way, it wasn't worth it for the guy who built the warehouse full of fish. It wasn't worth it for him because after a few years he closed. So there's definitely a limit. And the only people that will probably take a batch of 60, 70 clownfish, although sometimes you only get a few survivors depending on how good you are at keeping them, then the only people who are going to take those are shops, basically. And if you're selling to a shop, you have to sell them cheap because they obviously need to make their markup as well. So I'm not sure. I'll put a question mark next to that one, so I'm not entirely sure that's good. Bangais were fun. Bangais were easy. The male does all the work for you. So sometimes you go to public aquariums. I know Sydney Aquarium is like this. I think they've got maybe a 15-foot display tank, maybe even bigger than that. And it is full of tiny, tiny baby Bangai cardinals. And although there's massive fish in there, somehow they're surviving. I remember them being in the anemones and urchins and stuff like that. So they can actually survive without any form, in a big enough tank, without any form of live food. But with those, the best thing to do is obviously separate the male on the last day. As soon as you catch him in a net, he spits them out. You usually get about probably 25 sometimes you might get that's a good batch. Sometimes you only get 3. It depends on how experienced your male is, because if he's not experienced, he will eat the babies. So I used to like to catch them just before they were about to hatch. You can tell when they're ready because they have these little silver eyes, and you see them poking out the mouth. And as soon as they start poking out the mouth, once you grab them in the net, the male immediately spits them out, and then you take the male out, put it back into the main fish tank, and then you put all the little babies in a separate tank. Now, again, they do need live food, but you can, and you have a much better success rate with live food, but you can raise them with rotifers. Frozen rotifers I had success with. They do have a problem called sudden frighting syndrome, when I think it's about day 12. It's been probably 5 years since I've done it, so I might be wrong there. But all of a sudden, randomly, half of them will die for no reason. There must be a reason, but it's not a reason that anyone is aware of. They're eating and they're happy and healthy, and all of a sudden they just die. So it's like at birth they've got like a time bomb on them. So it's I loved doing that. It was really, really rewarding breeding Bangais. Again, there's not a huge amount of money in them, but it's better than nothing. And if you can breed them and then put them in your sump and feed them rotifers, then there really, really is hardly any effort involved more than just maintaining a tank. And if you get 12 of them, again, it's like, or 10 of them, and they're £15 each. People usually, if you're selling to the public, you can get a little bit more than if you sold them to a shop. But I think they'll always be a desirable fish. So weirdly, no one's ever really got into the reason they don't do it properly. Like, like with clownfish, they breed them intensively, and they get all these different strands and strains of them. There was one strand of Bangai cardinals where they were half black, and no one ever saw them again. I don't know why we haven't been able to do the same thing with Bangais as we have with clownfish. I know the reason that they're not as commercially viable, and that's because they don't have as many babies. So clownfish have a lot more babies than Bangai cardinals. But I think every tank should have a pair of Bangai cardinals, and if I'm honest, they're peaceful, they're pretty to look at, and when they breed, it's one of the most fulfilling things that you can do in this hobby for relatively little effort. So if you haven't got a Bangai cardinal, go buy one. So that's breeding fish. Now, obviously, there are a lot more fish which are bred in captivity than those two. But the reality is those are done on an industrial scale by people that know what they're doing. The biggest issue usually is the size of the mouth of the fry. So they need a copepod, which is incredibly tiny for most reef fish. And although I don't know if it's readily available now, it didn't used to be readily available. And that was the issue. And I believe that a lot of the originally, when they first started breeding them, they were actually taking seawater with all the different organisms in the seawater, and the fry were eating out of the seawater. So, and then eventually they worked out what it was they were eating, and then managed to cultivate it. But it's not something, I don't think, although things change all the time, that it's not something that's cultivated by hobbyists usually. So let's go with that. Now, before I move on to the corals, I want to have a quick look at the comment section. It's interesting because someone has written something which I totally disagree with already. But Foxy Reef is here, so hello. Rastaman Jam, hey. I made 1,500 euros in 2 years. That's good. Make sure you tell the tax man. Would you recommend SPS for a newbie, or would you go LPS? Would LPS be a better option? It depends what you're trying to achieve. I get, not just me, again, Reef Dog, I'll speak for Reef Dog now. We get questions all the time that they don't have much background behind it. So I got a message literally today, just saying my fish are dying. And that was it. And the reality is, what can I do with that information, if you see what I mean? I mean, if some advice, if you're going to ask a YouTuber for some help, then the best thing to do is send as much information as you possibly can, because as I said, we get messages, and even that won't guarantee a reply. We get messages all the time from people, but the messages which just say, "My fish is dying," or "Do you know why my coral is not open?" When you ask that question, we have to ask another question back, and then you have to reply, and then we have to ask another question again and again and again. So it's better to basically, if you're going to ask someone for help, put as much information, do as much work as you possibly can yourself to show us that you have actually tried, rather than just asking. Because so if you put all your parameters down, if you said that you had tried this, and this, or this was what you changed 2 weeks ago, I'm trying to help you going forward. That if you want someone to help you, you need to put a little bit of effort in yourself as well. So going back to your question, it doesn't give me a lot. Would I recommend SPS for a newbie? It depends. Are you a complete newbie with no experience? Because generally LPS is considered better or an easier option for a complete newbie. Soft corals are usually an even better option for a newbie, but it all depends on what you're trying to achieve. SPS, it's difficult for me to judge anymore as well, because when you know what you're doing, SPS is not as frightening as it seems to be. So if you're someone who can control your parameters and you can tell when, or not necessarily tell, but you test your alkalinity and you can increase your alkalinity when it's too low, then which an alkalinity is usually the big one, but calcium as well, and obviously magnesium. If you're pretty comfortable with maintaining those levels for soft corals or LPS, there's no reason you can't have SPS corals. Some SPS corals are almost invasive, which I will get onto in a minute. Oh, I've just got, so my corals are not happy. RO water 0, TDS parameters are fine. ICP fine. What is fine? This is part of the problem. Fine is not a parameter, and what is fine? This is what I found interesting when I got back from Spain, is that my alkalinity was 8.4 on one of the tanks. Now, just before, and I knew I shouldn't do this. This is always a terrible idea. If ever you're going away, don't ever change anything, especially if you're going away for 4 days like me. For whatever reason, I decided to change the phosphate remover. My neighbor was feeding the fish, and I just thought, just in case he puts too much in, I'll change the phosphate remover. That brought the phosphate down, and phosphate and alkalinity are very closely linked with each other, because high phosphate inhibits basically the process of calcium and alkalinity joining. Essentially, I think that's correct. But basically, if you lower your phosphate, your alkalinity consumption will go up. And I lowered the phosphate, and 4 days later, my alkalinity went from 8.4 or 8.2 down to 7. Now, it's not a huge swing, and natural seawater is 7 point something, so it's not bad. But what I thought was odd, I walked in, and there was one frag, just one, that was dying, and it was a Seriatopora. And I thought, that is like the hardiest SPS coral you can get. So what would cause that? But I instantly knew that something was wrong, because if that coral's upset, there's got to be something. So as soon as I tested my water, I found out what it was. But if you don't have that level of experience where you can look at that one coral and go, doesn't look quite right. It wasn't dead. It started stripping at the bottom. And what was interesting, I have loads of frags of that, loads and loads of them, probably like 40 frags of it. And but it was only one. And that one was enough to tell me something's wrong. Now that instinct, that feeling you get of just looking at the tank and knowing something's wrong, that takes a long time to develop. So it's hard, as I said, for me to say whether SPS is for beginners or not, because it all comes down to how diligent you are, is the reality of it. And I know people that do very well with SPS and can't keep a torch coral alive. So again, these are live animals that we're dealing with. There are no guarantees. There is no and what's interesting is that soft corals, LPS, and SPS, we consider them as specifically defined, but the reality is they are just labels that we have put on them. So we have labeled a Montipora an SPS coral because it has small polyps. But there are other corals which look similar, or where it's usually more, it's usually between LPS and SPS, where you go, that's borderline, which category that would fit into. So just because something is an LPS does not make it easy. Just because something is a soft coral, some soft corals are impossible to keep, and some SPS corals are literally invasive, like Tropic Thunder Montipora, which is like the worst possible Montipora you can get. I think I've got a probably like a fifth of one of my coral trays is probably Tropic Thunder Montipora now, and that's partly because I sort of just have left it to do its own thing. There is another that's a coral which looks very similar, but between an SPS and an LPS. The Hollywood Stunner Chalice, very, very thin. Although you do see really long polyps actually at night, so I understand actually why it's an LPS. But definitely a lot of people would confuse that with being an SPS coral. So yes, I've kind of lost track of where I was. One unexpected live stream. Happy Sunday. Thank you, Chris. I never do expected live streams. I usually just think to myself, I'm a bit bored now, so let's go talk to a load of other fish weirdos. And here I am. So what do you think about cycling a tank with media from a matured tank? Do you think there will be a problem with pests or anything? Again, pests don't come from nowhere. So there is, if the tank has no pests in it, it's impossible for you to get pests. So there's no reason for you not to do that, other than it depends on where that media is stored, because it can come with photosynthetic pests which you can't see, and then when you put into a brand new environment where it's got no other, it has no other competitors. Usually what happens is one organism will take over. So it will either be dinoflagellates or diatoms or cyanobacteria. So you can cycle a tank with media. I would highly recommend going to watch BRS's. They've done a video series on cycling tanks. It's biome cycling. That's what it's called. It's a hard watch, I would say, for a new hobbyist. It is definitely a hard watch for a new hobbyist, but it has been the most valuable thing that I've watched in years. It genuinely has been. You can watch it and you can know what's going on with when you cycle a tank, whereas before you just kind of just hope and pray, or you see things happening, you don't really know why they're happening, and then they're there one day and then they disappear the next. But a very, very brief condensed version of what is happening is you might have a species. Let's put on a grander scale. You might put a couple of mice in there, and then those mice breed, and there's no predators, so those mice keep breeding constantly. As long as there's a food source, they'll keep breeding, and all of a sudden you're overrun with mice, and that might be dinoflagellates, for example. And then you'll introduce a predator, which could be a cat, or in terms of dinoflagellates, a copepod. And it will take a long time for those two cats to eat enough mice and then breed to create a sustainable population where it evens out. So that is basically what's happening on a microscopic level with all of the things that are in your tank, whether it's cyanobacteria, diatoms, dinoflagellates. And what happens is when all of a sudden you have a bloom of them, for example, diatoms, it's usually because something has changed. Diatoms, for example, are closely associated with silicates. So if all of a sudden your RO water, you haven't changed the filters often enough, and you put the RO water contains silicates, you're then putting a food source into the tank, which the dinoflagellates didn't have, and then all of a sudden their population can explode. And then as soon as you stop putting those silicates into the tank, the dinoflagellates then die off because they can't survive because there's no food source for them anymore. So it is nothing that happens in our tanks, although we think that they're uncontrollable, or we think that things just happen, or it's almost like it's magic. Everything that happens in our tanks has a reason. It's just until I watched that thing on BRS, I didn't know what the reason was, and that absolutely opened my eyes. So yeah, it's right. So as I said, I'll move on. The next thing section of this is, so I've covered the basic ones. Coral. Now, coral is absolutely, it is possible for you to it's possible for you to fund your entire tank from coral. I saw Jay's Real Reef just come in. Good evening, all evening. Right, so pleased there is a live on tonight. Out of interest, which livestock has the biggest profit margins? Good question, Jay. That is what I will get to in a second. So, profit margins are is what will surprise people. So, I said I'll get onto that in a second, but no, I'll get onto it now. I might as well just deal with it because otherwise I'll forget. So, a lot of people think that there is huge profit margins in things like gold torches, or maybe a scully, or I don't know, something that you don't get acanthophilia anymore. So I haven't seen acanthophilia in a long time. But Trichophilia is another one. Anything which is sort of like a very slow growing coral. So scullies, trachees, euphyllias are pretty slow growing as well. They aren't that easy to cultivate, well, especially scullies, because obviously if you cut a scully in half, it takes an awful long time. It will eventually turn back to a circle, but it takes a very, very long time to do that. So they're not really an ideal candidate for aquaculture. The corals which are the most profitable ones are actually usually the fastest growing ones, and they are things like Xenia, which to this day, I don't know how many times I have to tell people, stop buying Xenia. It's one of my biggest sellers. People love it. I don't get it. So if I paid £15 for Xenia, I don't know, 2 years ago, think about how much Xenia I've been able to sell from that original piece in that time. So those are the ones with the most profit margin, because that one piece has been turned into probably over 100 pieces now. So 100 pieces at £15 a piece is like 1,500. So you can make a huge amount from a single piece. Other pieces which are like that are mushrooms, are a good one. Not all mushrooms are created equally, is what I've noticed. Some mushrooms grow really, really quickly and will spread like wildfire, and some of them grow incredibly slowly. So I've had a jawbreaker for over 2 years now. It's never produced a single baby. And they are notorious for it. They're notorious for taking over 2 years to produce, to split or leave a little foot somewhere to create a new one. So although people would think, oh, wow, you've got that expensive jawbreaker, the reality is that jawbreaker has done nothing but consume hold my money for 2.5 years now. So there is a very big difference between, and this is what blows people's mind, expensive corals and cheap corals. More often than not, the cheap ones are the ones that you make the most money out of. The corals which I make the most money out of for SPS, I've got 6 different digis. I've got red, blue, green, forest fire, bubblegum, and purple. And they grow probably about an inch a month each section. So obviously each of those colonies might have, I don't know, 10 of them, 10 different sort of, sticks. I'm not sure, would you call a finger of a coral? I suppose a finger. Each of those will have those. So each of those 10 can grow an inch in a month. So if you're selling those for £15, you can see how it quickly adds up. And obviously I've got 6 of those colonies. Another one which you can sell a huge amount of is Passillopora. People love Passillopora. It doesn't ship as well as some of the other SPS corals for some reason. Acropora, again, people think that the really, really expensive Acropora is are what you want to go for. They grow much slower, and even if you are importing them, which obviously you need to have a shop to do, there is a risk where you import them. You have to look after Acropora for probably 6 months before you can sell a high-end, expensive piece. It's not something where you can just, because they lose their color. So if you just get them in and frag them and ship them out, you can do it, but you soon have some disgruntled customers because it doesn't really work. I don't have a huge amount of Acropora at the moment. Usually what I do is I'll import a box of mixed corals, and they quite often contain a Acropora. And then I've got a few local people that will come and buy the whole colony because that's just what they want. It's just, I can keep Acropora. I do have Acropora in there growing. They're just not really they're not my thing. And I think it's quite important when you do this to do your thing. It's I still treat these to some extent, these tanks, like they're my own personal tanks, which is dangerous. But I sell a huge amount of really, really basic SPS corals. As I said, Digis, Hystrix, Limeberry Hystrix, the encrusting Montiporas, things like Sunset Montiporas and Mystic Sunset Montiporas or grafted Montiporas. All these things, all these corals which have been around for a really, really long time, they have they've got a set price almost. So there is an industry set price for the corals which have been around for a long, long time. So when you get a new coral in, say Raja Rampage, for example, and at first that coral might be £300 for an eye when it first comes in. And then 6 months later, it can be £90 for an eye. So when they're newer corals, or the corals you don't see as often for whatever reason, the price is high at first, and then if you wait 6 months or a year, it will gradually do quite a steep drop until it levels off, and then it creates sort of an industry standard cost of that coral. Corals obviously are usually cheaper from when you buy from other hobbyists, which I do myself. I've actually asked someone today for a watermelon chalice because Reef got one, and I was jealous. I thought, how come he's allowed one and I'm not? So that is one way of doing it. You can grow corals. The big one for corals for beginners. You can start this almost from day one, providing you have nutrients. Zoas are big business. You can make a huge amount of money from zoas, whether it's a farm or whether it's your own tank. You absolutely can make plenty of money from selling zoas if you're selling the right ones. But there is obviously a risk involved. Again, zoas are the worst coral when it comes to the price dropping. I bought some Space Chaos zoas, I think, when they were like £150 a head. And then now I think they're about £30 a head. So you have to be careful what you buy. And the trick is, if you're buying a coral which is expensive at first, and it's reasonably new, you know, one of those crazy zoas. Let's say the Space Chaos zoa was probably a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. If you get some of the first ones, and you get one little head, and you can easily frag it, sell that head. Don't wait until you get 5 or 6, because by the time you've got 5 or 6, all the other people that started with one head have started selling their second head. So when it comes to propagating corals, if you've got something that's different or new or interesting, I've actually got 2 grafted pieces which are they were just normal grafted pieces which have developed streaks of purple. Now I don't know anyone else who has that. And there's also a grafted digitata which is red with green streaks in it, which I've got. And I also noticed that my Setosa has green streaks in it as well. So, but the Setosa is like the least of all of them. I think I know those green streaks are caused by a fluorescent protein virus. That's what causes it. And I think that they didn't have those streaks in them originally. The Montipora definitely didn't have green and purple in it originally, but it definitely does now. What I have noticed is that the purple isn't as strong as the green. The green keeps growing, whereas the purple I have to keep almost encouraging to grow. So it's but if I can cultivate that so that the green and purple grow equally together, that will be a really, really nice piece. But the reason I'm holding on to it is because as soon as I sell it to someone, someone else will grow it, then they'll sell it to someone, and all of a sudden the price comes down really, really rapidly. So it's there's definitely a way of doing uh, of when to sell what corals. And I have made a huge mistake before where I bought loads of really expensive corals thinking, oh yes, I'm gonna grow these out and sell them. And you wait a year and you've grown them all out, and all of a sudden they're worth a fraction of the cost of what they were previously. So you have to sell a lot more of them. So if you have a coral like that, grow it, sell it quickly, and then keep obviously a frag, and then start to get your money back, and then start obviously propagate it on a bigger scale. I know a lot of people have frag racks in their tank. What I used to do is if you've got a sump which has a reasonably large area in it, I used to put a frag rack in there and put one of the AI lights over the frag rack, and then that was completely good enough to keep any of these little frags I was growing at the time. I focused mostly on encrusting Montipora at first, and what was the other one? I tried Montipora panoensis. It doesn't survive as well as the encrusting Montipora. I think that is sort of reflected in the price. So the price is higher. Basically, how corals work, the lower the survival rate of the coral, generally, if it's something that can be propagated, the higher the price. Because obviously, if I sell it to 10 people and then they all start selling it, all of a sudden I've got 10 competitors. Whereas if I sell it to 10 people and 8 of them kill it, I've only got 2 competitors. So that's kind of how it works with regards to selling the corals. But there's definitely, as I said, there is a huge difference between propagating coral and either importing it or selling it from a wholesaler. Because obviously with a wholesaler, there is a cost attached to it. And with regards to wholesalers, many of you wouldn't be able to get accounts for them anyway, because you have to have a pet shop license and things like that. And it's the same as with importers. So even though you don't need a pet shop license to sell coral, it's almost like an industry standard thing to go, yes, I'm a serious vendor. So that's why you need to do it. And then the pet shop license, I think I renewed mine the other day. It was about £330 plus you have to have insurance, which is £100. So before you've even imported your first coral, there's £400 right there. So a lot of people like the idea of doing it, but more than actually doing it themselves. So the other thing that you can do, and this was what I did on a big scale, and you can do this with corals, you can do this with houses. I used to buy whole tanks from people, and I would keep what I wanted, and then I would sell everything that I didn't want. So to some extent, every single thing, this still blows my mind. It still blows my mind. So the very, very first tank I ever got cost me £400. It came with a breeding group of 7 frontosas, and I sold the frontosas for £400 the next day. So my first tank was entirely free. And everything else I did for my tank, I generated the money from, as I said, from selling RO, from selling baby fish, from selling corals, from selling all sorts of things. The biggest way for me to scale up was actually with tank breakdowns. So I would buy a tank, sell everything I didn't need, and then keep the stuff I wanted. So it's even all of those basic SPS corals. It would blow your mind how much, if you realize how much I spent on them. But all of the basic SPS corals, which I bought probably 6 years ago, all the digis, all the Ceratopora, the Stylophoras, they all came from one tank. One person was absolutely desperate to get rid of it. He bought some seahorses. The fish shop was saying, look, we can't hold these for you anymore. He had planned to sell his tank to one person, was the plan. But the reality is most people don't want to buy a whole tank, and they don't want to buy all the corals. There's too much hassle. Whereas it's some of the best way to make money, because if you can take someone's hassle away from them, and they don't have to have 15 people come over to go, yeah, I kind of like that one piece, I'll pay you £15 for that. They usually will take a considerable amount less for it. Now, I don't mind offering them a considerable amount less. That's their choice. They have a choice. They can either go through the effort of still running the tank, because remember, our tanks are on a meter. Every day that costs you more money. All the salt you need costs you more money. The water and the electricity. So eventually people usually get fed up of trying to sell their tanks for £2,000 because that's what they paid for them, and they'll often will take £700 instead for it, just for someone to take the hassle away because they don't want it anymore. And that is an absolutely brilliant way to be able to either expand your own collection or to be able to sell to other people. Because as I said, and what happens is you start to build up a group of people in your local area which you know will buy from you. It does come with a problem that sometimes you will get things that other people won't want. Almost every fish in the coral room was someone else's fish at one point, and I got loads of ugly fish in there. There's a pajama cardinal, ugly. I've got a few. You'd have to Google it to know what they were, but they're like one of the ugliest tangs. They are orange stripe bristletooth tangs, and don't let the orange stripe bristletooth tangs fool you. They are basically just brown. When they're juveniles, they have orange stripes, and as they get older, they lose them. And I've got 2 of them from 2 people who didn't want them. I have a few Scopus tangs, ugly. Some people in the comments now will go, I love Scopus tangs, they're just wonderful, but Scopus tangs, when they get older, they're just ugly. Some of the younger ones are not too bad. They can have a slightly greenish tinge to them, but generally they're ugly. And there is a load of fish. There's just so many fish in there. I've got, I think, 4 or 5, maybe 6 clownfish, a couple of maroons. Don't want them, but no one else wants them. So they just end up here somehow. There was one of the London Aquatic Design. I've got his fox face, and I think it's because it was too big for him. But I don't know if London Aquatic Design is still here, but that fox face is getting very friendly. It's before I could put my hands in, and there was no fear that it was ever going to get me. I think it's now learnt that my hands mean food, and I put my hands in, and all of a sudden, it's like I see he's a couple of inches from me. So at some point, he is going to stab me. Definitely. I can feel it coming. With regards to aggressive fish, the worst fish I have, which is another one I don't like, and again, some people will go, oh, they're amazing. I have a regal tang. And regal tangs are I just don't like them. I've never liked them. Some people love them. They're a nice blue color, but I don't know if it's because I have this fear of them because of, it's like a deep-seated fear of white spot, I think, from when I very, very first started. It never has white spot. It's a little bit aggressive. It bites me. It literally will make me bleed. If I put my hand in to put mastic in, it bites me every day, and every day it makes me bleed. So it is a bit of a pain in the ass from that way. But I've just never really liked them. But that's what happens. If you buy other people's tanks and you try and make money from them and sell it off, then yeah, it is a high risk, high reward strategy though, because when you move a tank, you can lose plenty of stuff as well. Melanoris wrasse are dull. Melanoris wrasse are not dull. They're one of the best wrasse. They're also one of the most useful wrasse. We have said in fact, you have said some controversial things before, Reef Talk, but that is one of the most significant ones. How can you say that? I've missed a few comments now. So Jay's Ruru said, what's worse, Xenia or Aptasia? You can good luck selling Aptasia to anyone. Although you'd be surprised how often I see shops sell rocks with Aptasia on, and then people just don't notice. To some extent, it's not my place, I've realized, to try to. I will occasionally say something to someone if there's no one around, but I don't want shops banning me from being there. So it's not really my place to say anything to anyone, and it's everyone's own responsibility to know what's going in their tank and be able to identify pests and different things. When people do a consultation with me, so some people will have a very specific set of questions when we do a consultation, and then we'll go through their questions. It's very, very focused on what they want. But sometimes people are brand new to the hobby and they just want someone to talk to and point them in the right direction. And when that happens, what I do is I've just read one. I'll come back to you in a second, James. When that happens, where was I? What was I even talking about? It's literally just gone out of my mind because I read a comment. Someone in the comments tell me what I was just saying because it's completely gone. This is what happens when I'm on my own. How has that happened? And look, you're obviously listening either because none of you in the comment section told me what I was talking about. Well, I have literally completely. Okay, look, I've lost what I was talking about. So if someone wants to remind me, you can tell me. I will answer James's question, which is how is the nudibranch experiment going? That experiment is not going very well at all, and that's what threw me off. They did have. Oh yeah, I was talking about consultations. That's true. Yes. I'll come back to that. Which one? Okay, the consultations. I was saying that some people have a very specific set of questions. That's right, and then some people will just getting into the hobby. And one of the things I do is I teach people the things that they need to learn about. So there is a list of specific pests which every single person should know about, and I go through that list with them, and they write them down, and they go away on their own to research them. Because if you can identify an aptasia, if you can identify a nudibranch, if you can identify a flatworm, if you can identify all sorts of different things at the very beginning, hadroids, for example, one that I saw being sold in the other day in the shop. If you can identify these things, it will save you so much hassle in the long run. So there's certain things that you absolutely should know, and those are one of them. So going back to the question with James, the nudibranch experiment is not going well at all. In fact, I'm pretty sure. So some of them were put into the system just as like as a backup. I don't know if they will if they'll survive in there. And the ones that were in the tank, they did not do. The ones that were in the glass did not do very well. Is the honest answer. They were doing fine. They did breed. There were babies of them, and then I think what happened was basically I don't have an easy source of aptasia, so I basically I think I had enough to fund the adults, but I didn't have enough to fund I had enough to feed the adults. But then once there was a population of babies as well, the population crashed because there wasn't enough aptasia. So it's I live and learn. It was a bit of a fun experiment. If I did it again, I wouldn't do it in a jar. I know people do it in a jar. I'd do it properly in a tank. And what I would do is I would get a load of aptasia, cut them all up, spread them as much as possible I can in this tank because you don't even need it very much. There's not a lot of effort involved with breeding aptasia. And then I would have a different separate section specifically just for the nudibranchs, and then once a day I would just cut an aptasia out and put it in there, rather than trying to put 3 or 4 aptasia in one go, and then a week later put a few more in, and then from one of my friends gone, and then a week later put a few more in, because at some point in that week they eat all of the aptasia and then there's no more. So it's it just wasn't, it didn't work out for me. It is my own fault. It's as simple as that. I think one of the parts of being in this hobby, in fact, one of the parts of just in general, is accepting responsibility for things that I could easily go, oh yeah, maybe it got too hot or it didn't go well or whatever. I didn't try hard enough. It's as simple as that. So that was completely down to me. So it's and if I did it again, I would try harder. So yeah. Unconnected wait 1 second. Reef Doc, what is the most common mistake you hear about your consultations, or any advice that you give most often? Patience is the most often one I give, and not, because there's a lot of people that want to rush into this. They want to really read. They're excited. They've done some basic research. Usually, I get a whole range of different people. Some people come to me and they're very, very experienced, and they've just got a very specific issue that they want to deal with. And some people come to me at the very, very beginning. The beginning people I like the most. It's a little bit less pressure on me. We go through a specific format of certain things. As I said, it's difficult. it's difficult. An example was the other day. There was someone who was having an incredibly difficult time getting their nitrates down, and they've tried everything to get their nitrates down. They were putting in no-pox and water changes and things like that. And then I said, okay, it took me about 30 seconds. I said, let me look at your skimmer, and the skimmer wasn't dialed in correctly. What had happened? We, to some extent, YouTubers are dangerous, and BRS had recommended how a protein skimmer needed to be dialed in. And there was nothing wrong with how they wanted it dialed in, but for whatever reason, it didn't work for this person's tank. So I said, well, adjust that. And then because all the time your protein skimmer is not working, NoPox needs a protein skimmer to work. So you can't lower your, it's not some magic potion that you just pour in and NoPox all of a sudden takes your nitrate down. Basically, nitrate feeds, NoPox feeds a type of bacteria. The bacteria is skimmed out from with your protein skimmer. So if your protein skimmer is not skimming anything out, then you're not lowering your nitrates. It's as simple as that. So we adjusted his protein skimmer, and we did. There was a few other things that the guy was doing. He wasn't because he had an issue with phosphate as well. He was using Roaphos, but he was putting in a bag, and he was putting his carbon in a reactor. And what he actually is do, he just got it the wrong way around. You put the phosphate in the reactor because things like Roaphos or PhosEx need to be constantly turning. They need constant exposure, otherwise they won't work properly. Whereas carbon draws things to it, so it doesn't need to constant. It works better if it's to some extent if it's tumbling, but only a very tiny amount because carbon breaks up. So it's better actually in a bag, well, in my opinion, anyway. But there's just so it's difficult to say there's one specific thing because there's so many different things people want to talk about. But as I said, the people I like talking to the most are the people at the very, very early stage of their hobby, because what I get to do is I get to go, right, you don't need this. You don't need this. I know you're being told to buy this. Don't buy it, because all of a sudden they've got this expensive list, and that list halves because they realize that they don't need a tank controller on day one. Tank controllers are for more experienced hobbyists which want to tweak things and things like that. It's just a new person coming into the hobby does not need to spend hundreds of pounds on a tank controller. They don't need to spend hundreds of pounds on testing equipment. It's best at first, especially for the first 6 months, to get used to your tank tests, know what's going on with it, and be able to adjust the parameters when you need to, because you learn a lot more by doing that than having a machine do it for you. So there's it's like a minefield, this hobby, of what you do and don't need to buy. I would hate, like, I'd love to do a video of Reef Dog one day, not a video, but like a live stream, just to ask him how much money he's wasted. Because obviously I'm not going to say how much it is, but Reef Dog obviously spent a considerable amount of money over the last few years on his tanks. It's like thousands and thousands. And I just wonder how much of that was required. How much of that was a piece of equipment that you later replaced, like your lights, for example. How much of it, I know a lot of it, some of it's your camera equipment. How much of it was a fish that you bought which died because it was a terrible idea? How much of it was a coral which you bought which stripped almost immediately? There is a huge amount of wastage in this hobby if you don't know what you're doing. And especially if you're a beginner, it gets so much worse. So another thing was about putting things in your tanks, because that's how it started. One of my customers had an issue with corals, wasn't sure why, and his tank had 3 angelfish in it. It was as simple as that. So you take the 3 angelfish out, and all of a sudden the corals are starting to do much better. But he wasn't told. He was new. He wasn't told that he couldn't have a what was it? It was one of the large angelfish. I said I can picture it in my mind. It's yellow. It wasn't a dwarf one. It was literally one of the big ones. I can't remember. A flagfin angelfish. So he wasn't told that he wasn't told that you can't keep a flagfin angelfish with coral, but he was just told to buy it because companies have an incentive to sell you things. It's as simple as that. whereas I don't care what you buy. I don't care what you buy. I don't care if you listen to my advice or don't listen to my advice. I had a really, really nice review the other day from one of my first people I did a consultation for, and he said he's actually done it. It's going really, really well for him. And that was so rewarding for me to. I will post that somewhere at some point. Anyway, I'm missing some of the comments. So, any advice? Oh no, done that one. Unconnected. Do bumblebee snails eat vermitid snails? Oh, last time I said they don't, I was absolutely slaughtered in the comment section. There are videos of bumblebee snails eating vermitid snails. Apparently, I have not seen those videos. Bumblebee snails do, I believe, eat some type of snails. I don't know if they eat vermitids. They might eat the babies, but not the adults. Or what I do know is that I had them in the Red Sea tank. I bought about 70 of them, 70 bumblebee snails, because I get them at the wholesale cost, so they're like a fraction of the cost. And I put them all in there, and they did not eat the vermitids. I can assure you of that. So if 70 of them don't eat it, you know when you go to the shop and you buy 3 and you just hope for the best, chances are it's not going to do very well. There's a possibility that they could have other things that they're eating. I don't know. But for whatever reason, it didn't work for me. Vermitids are one of the more difficult things to get rid of. I even tried training a boxfish and a jewel puffer by smashing them up and then feeding them to, like, putting them in a little tank and trying to feed them to them. They just weren't interested. What I have found with vermitids is they usually will reach a level in the tank, like a maximum level, and then they stop and they don't keep breeding anymore, and then they usually start to die off. So it's the same as with anything. If there's no food for them, they can't survive. But they are one of them. They're one of the things which has been most difficult to deal with. But they're also one of the easiest things to keep out of your tank because they're clearly visible. It's like they've got a little snorkel waving at you, saying just cut me off and you'll be good. So that's the best thing to do. There's not a lot you can do once they're in there, but there is a lot you can do to keep them out, and that is the most important thing you can do. Prevention is so much better. Where are we? I reckon 90% of what I buy is for my benefit, not for the coral or fish. That's true, but how much of what you buy has been a waste? So if you have bought lights, for example, which I know you love lights, you've got like a light fetish for some reason. This is me. I put lights on, yeah, that'll do, and never think about them again. Never change the settings or anything. I know Reef Dog likes to put them on, and then 2 weeks later, stroke them for a little bit, caress them, and then a month later, change his mind, want some new ones, move in the next model. So how much do you think you wasted? In fact, anyone in the comment section, feel free to say how much you wasted, because it's I would have wasted thousands over the last 14 years buying things I shouldn't have done. It's just the list of that is like endless. Right. Reef Dog talking to someone else about changing his underwear. That's weird. Reef Dog loves splashing the cash. He changes lights. You change 100%. So many aquarium products that people buy are unnecessary. Yes, that's very true. I killed most of my zoas and gorgonias when I added a filefish to my tank. Take care of Aptasia. It was able to get in the nano in time and save some. That is very true. Filefish are one of the worst ones. The copper bands also are. They just almost swore then. In fact, I just remember this is my live stream. This is not Reef Dog. They're fucking awful, copper bands. They are the worst fish you can get, copper bands. I have more trouble. If someone said to me, what's the biggest trouble you have with your farm? And 2 years ago, someone said to me, what do you think it would be? I'd say water parameters or pest or whatever. Copper bands are awful. I don't know what it is. I think it's because they build you up. They build up. They're like surviving. They're eating, all happy and good, and then all of a sudden they start eating your acants, or all of a sudden they start eating your Trachophilia, or they start eating your Leptocerus. It's just I have lots of them, and it seems that almost all of them have some. They all eat a different coral. So if I take that coral out of the tank, they're fine. They don't start eating something else, but Each of them eats something different. As I said, acants and trachyphilias are definitely on the table or on the menu for them. One of them, as I said, eats Leptoceras, which is very odd. That doesn't look appetizing at all. So it's copper bands are the worst, and I wish people would stop buying them, and I wish people would stop importing them, because there's hardly let's put it this way: for every one good one that people get, there's probably like 100 terrible ones, whether they're dead, whether they don't eat, whether they are an issue in some way or another. What they're prone to certain diseases. I know they're quite prone to the things like flukes and stuff like that, and they might survive for a year, and all of a sudden they just stop eating, and you're just like, why? What's changed? You've been happy eating mysis for a year. So copper bands are like my nemesis. They are the worst thing about the farm. I have tried the Aptasia eating filefish. They don't work as the copper bands work better than Aptasia eating filefish. I know anecdotally, I believe that's better. I've heard that. I've never known of a Aptasia eating filefish which only eats Aptasia and doesn't eat coral ever. And I think I have one. Yeah, I have one copper band, just one, which doesn't appear to eat anything, and it's in the SPS tray. So it probably would eat things if it wasn't. That copper band actually came from Josh Powell, who I think is in the comment section. I saw him earlier. Yes, it's. I've had it for a little while now, but and the other thing they do is they just randomly get thin. They just randomly they're still eating and they just start getting thin, and you just think, what changed? So if I can encourage anyone, if you take anything away from this, which I know is about making money from your reef tank, don't buy copper band. Stop buying them, because you know how you think that you might be the lucky one. You think that you might just, this is what people do. They go, oh, if there's 1 in 100 which is successful, I might be that one. It's not likely, and it's quite cruel, if I'm honest. So just if you take anything away from this, stay away from copper bands. Although I know almost all of you will just ignore me. Would you use Miracle Mud in your sump with skimmer and refugium? I've never used Miracle Mud, and I don't like to talk about things I don't know. I've heard good things about it, and I've heard good things about it in a refugium. So I don't see any reason why not. The only reason I would be hesitant, or I'm hesitant, is because you've mentioned the skimmer, which suggests you know something about Miracle Mud and using a skimmer. So, but there are definitely people that use Miracle Mud with a skimmer. That's not a problem at all. I watched both Reef Dorks and your videos to start cycling your BioCube. I'll start cycling my BioCube. That's good. It's my one was obviously I did use doing the Red Sea way. I think BRS has just finished their I haven't seen it yet, but I think they've just finished their series. And I saw that it says we've changed the way reefers will do something forever or something like that. It was a catchy title. Whatever they have done, I will probably follow that, if I'm honest, because it's a really interesting it's a really interesting series they've done, and they actually put a lot of effort and a lot of science goes behind it, so I believe it rather than just anecdotal evidence. When I first started, I bought a £100 test kit with things like oxygen. Yes, using oxygen test the whole one time. Yeah, another thing that people do is the ammonia checker from Hannah. It's I like Hannah. I like all their instruments. I'm not sure ammonia checker is required. It costs like £70, but so a lot of their other checkers, brilliant. And I give people a list of the checkers of what test kits I use in the consultation, because here's an example: the Hannah calcium checker is more complicated to use than just the normal Salifert one. So if something's quite complicated, you're less likely to use it. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend the Hannah calcium checker, and I would go for a Salifert checker over there, because you don't need it to be that accurate. Whereas if I was going to say for alkalinity, for example, I would go for the Hannah checker for alkalinity over the Salifert test kit. Now, a new person wouldn't know that. A new person will walk into a shop and they will buy whatever they're told to buy, or they'll look on a forum and they'll buy whatever they're told to buy. But I've used a whole range of test kits, and I know that my favorite ones, Red Seas, are very similar to the Salifert ones. They're a bit more expensive. The Hannah. Oh yeah. I was gonna say someone just wrote the Hannah calcium check is difficult. Is a pitta, which I assume means difficult. So I thought all the way. Yes, I agree. For calcium, absolutely not for alkalinity. I had an aptasia eating filefish that cleared all my zoas, but not but coral. Wait. I had my aptasia eating filefish also clear my zoas, not many, but still coral. Yes, yeah, zoas are usually a prime target for aptasia eating filefish. I added up my spreadsheet. I wasted £500 since the 6th of August this year. If I look back the last 4 years, it'll be four figures. Well, try 14 years. Try 14 years, and then you'll. I would love to know how much I've spent. I'd love to know how much salt I've spent over the years, how much electricity I've spent over the years, how much um, test kits and fish and coral. I'd love to know how how much richer I would be. Then again, as I said, a lot of the stuff that I've done, I've sold coral to buy more coral, to sell more coral, and eventually I got up to the coral farm. And then obviously I got a loan for the coral farm, but the loan obviously has been paid back with coral. So essentially, everything I have was started from that original £400, give or take. Obviously, there were times when people bought me birthday presents or Christmas presents, or I was given stuff or things like that. But basically, it took me 14 years to go from starting with zero or £400 to what is quite a reasonable coral farm now. So if it's easy, where are we? Oh no, I think we're up to date with the comments. Nice. It's much more difficult doing a live stream when you're by yourself. For example, Reef Talk usually talks when I take a drink, whereas now you just have to listen to me drink. But I think I was going to go. I know the only thing I didn't go into was the only coral I didn't mention actually were mushrooms. I don't think I did. I very briefly mentioned mushrooms. Mushrooms can be hit and miss. You can get absolutely plagued with some discosoma mushrooms, and you can get some mushrooms which don't grow very much at all. A lot of the bounce mushrooms don't grow very much at all, and you have to cut those. And again, it's high risk, high reward, because if you can cut it and it survives, you can sell it for a lot of money. If you cut it and doesn't survive, you've just lost a lot of money. And that is basically what this whole job, the whole company for me is about. It's interesting. So I hadn't actually gone into the coral room today until about 5 o'clock this evening. So I don't go in there every morning. I went out this morning and then I came back and someone wanted to come and pick up some coral. And so I opened it for the first time and he was standing next to me. And I said to him, every single morning when I open this door, I expect everything to be dead. And if it's not all dead, it's a good day. And that is actually true. I don't expect it to be dead. I know there is a possibility that at some point, because remember, I'm only in there for a few hours a day. So let's say I'm in there for 3 or 4 hours a day, and that would be a lot. I've been there a lot that day. So if let's say I was only there for 1 hour that day, there are 23 hours where something could go wrong before I had come back round to being there again. So it is a very, very high risk. You can mitigate the risks, but there is a very high risk, high reward. You can make reasonably good money. You can definitely make enough money from selling coral to fund your tank. A lot of people think that their fish tanks are a money pit, and they're just not. They're literally, if you do it the right way, they are not a money pit at all. But it comes down to buying the right corals. And the reason I'm doing this live stream this week is because I didn't have time to make the video. But next week's video, I'm going to do a list of my top 5 corals, which I know I've kind of told you already that I sell. And I'll probably put why I sell them, why they're good. What I don't really understand is that when you sell corals secondhand, as in through a forum or something, for whatever reason, people don't buy things like Xenia. Don't know why. They don't buy Xenia. They're not really that interested in digitata. They're not that interested in some of the Monteporas, like the red plating Monteporas or the green plating Monteporas. But these are pieces which I sell loads and loads of. And I just wonder, I've literally, this is just coming to my head literally this second. I wonder if the people that are mostly on the forums are people that are a little bit, don't get me wrong, there'll be some people, but the regular people that are on there buying stuff and talking and things like that, if they're a little bit more experienced people. And the more experienced people maybe aren't necessarily interested in some of the common stuff. I don't know. Let me know if you can think of another reason. But for some reason, if people are selling Xenia on Facebook or a forum or a website, they don't sell it. Whereas I sell loads of it. So what's the difference? And what usually happens when there's secondhand, when people are selling secondhand from their houses, the price gets pushed down so much. It just gets compressed as people compete with each other, that it becomes not worthwhile selling it, and then you might as well just put it in the bin. So I think that might also be why, because if people are trying to sell a frag for £3 for a bit of digitata, who wants someone coming over to their house, talking to them in their house with their fish tank, looking at their fish tank for an hour, and then as they leave, they take that one frag and they give you £3. It's just not worth it. So that might be why it doesn't seem to be as worth it selling through a forum. I don't know why, but that's my only assumption. Whereas I said here, people, and the corals cost I think £12 here for those sorts of pieces, or maybe they might be slightly less than that. But I sell them all day, every day. People buy them all day, every day. So what am I doing differently to other people? Don't know. So yeah, I only expected this stream to go for an hour, if I'm honest, but it's now been an hour and 20 minutes. I am more than happy to take any questions, but I am. It's been quite a long day for me already. So whenever someone comes to be fair, the guy doesn't seem to be in the chat. He's probably hiding from his wife because he doesn't want me to say Jamie was here and Jamie spent loads of money. Actually, so but he's usually in the chat somewhere during the live streams. But I hope he's here, and I hope it's on the TV, and I hope his wife's now looking at him going, "You spent how much?" But if that was a joke, by the way, if that actually happens, that didn't actually happen. Jamie was very good today, but he did get a nice free coral. So, Reef Talk's flight is delayed. Can I keep going for another hour? My flight was. This is not about reef keeping, but my flight was delayed when I went to Spain, and I met a girl at the airport. She's a girl I knew went a long time ago, probably like 7 years ago, and she was actually a friend of one of my sisters, and we went for breakfast and then went to a bar at the airport, and our flight kept getting delayed by 20 minutes, and in the end, the delay was 4 hours, but we were in Wetherspoons, and we went, the probability is going to be delayed again. So we ordered another drink, and then the Wetherspoons was heaving because obviously there was so many delays. So everyone was trying to get in there, and it turned out that although our drink came in 10 minutes the first time, the second time it took 30 minutes. So there was a. I'm laughing because I'm reminiscing about it. There is what happened was this was at like 11 in the morning or something. I had a Jack Daniels and Coke, and she was drinking amaretto and Coke, and it arrived, and then we downed the drink, and then we ran through the airport. We were going for a wedding. We were starting early. It wasn't our wedding, but we ran through the airport, and I had to. I didn't drink a lot, but I'd had too much to be running through an airport that had that many people in it. Let's put it that way. And then we got to the gate, and the gate was closed. So we waited for 4 hours because we didn't want to give up our table. We weren't there the whole time because we were like bastards. Once we had our table, we were ordering food and stuff like that. But we got to the gate and the gate was closed. Luckily, there was a queue, so we were the last people in there. So I almost missed my flight to Spain. Just joined. What happened to your mic? Nothing. It's here. Why? Is something wrong? No one's mentioned there's anything wrong with my mic, but it's in. It's got a little blue light on, so it suggests it's on. Right. Let's go back to the questions. Which forum places do you buy coral from? I'm actually not on any forums, and I don't go on any of the Facebook groups really either. I took myself off forums and stuff like that a long time ago. They're very good for beginners, but and there is stuff to learn from them. But there's something about any hobby, the internet, you know what I'm trying to say, being anonymous, and toxic behavior. Basically, I don't get it. I don't. It wasn't necessarily toxic behavior towards me. But for the sound quality, it's pretty bad. Might just be a problem on my end. Strange. As I said, no one else has mentioned it. It's the same one I always use. But just keep asking him questions to keep him here. What are the most hardy corals at your farm? You are literally just asking me these questions now just to keep me safe. So are you literally sitting at the airport, Alex? What are the most hardy corals? Good. Oh, well, obviously there's certain soft corals which grow like crazy. The ones which seem to be the hard clove polyps do really well. Xenia, I realized the other day, one of my pumps fell off. It fell off the other day, and it must have been off for a couple of days, and all the Xenia shriveled up for whatever reason. This was when that happened. When did I find it? A couple of days ago I found that. So, but yeah, all the oh, bad today. That's really interesting. Not sure. Well, we've been an hour and a half, so if it's bad, we just have to accept it, and then and I'll deal with it next week if I'm doing a live stream with Reef Talk. Yeah, what was interesting is when the only coral which seemed to be affected by having no flow was the Xenia. It all shriveled up. It's like the mic. It's over 100%. Great sound, picture is shit. Yeah, I like that one. I'll even. Yeah, I just use the webcam on my laptop. Look, I'm not one of these fancy people that does live streams all the time. If I had a few more, I'm gonna there you go. So Jeremy Huffman has just put in a super chat. Thank you very much. I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that super chat to buy a microphone because I've now been told that it's shit. So, I'm going to be placing all this week. Oh, so 1 second. Let's deal with Jeremy. Do you have any advice on dealing with dinoflagellates, raising temperature? I have an outbreak. It's terrible. As I said, watch. So some copepods do eat dinoflagellates, and that is probably the best way of dealing with it. I've never had to face it myself, so it's very difficult for me to tell you something which I've not. I've had them before, and they just come, and then a couple of weeks later or a week later, they just disappear on their own. It depends on what type of dinoflagellate you have, but there are definitely some copepods which eat them. So some dinoflagellates are in the water, and some of them are on the back of the glass or any surfaces. The ones that are on the surfaces I know are eaten by copepods, and that was one of the most interesting thing I found from BRS's video, that they're eaten by copepods. And I think you're in America, so obviously it's in dollars, so I assume you're in America. There is a company which produces copepods and rotifers and phytoplankton. It's called something. Someone in the comments might remember. Obviously, I don't buy from them because I'm in the UK. Actually, 1 second. Well, if I type in America, right. Let's see if this comes up for you. It has not come up, although I did write America with an M. Right, by phytoplankton. No, see, all the ones that are coming up. It's called Algae Barn. That's what it's called. I just remembered. Algae Barn are the people that sell it. I believe they do a specific. Yes, everyone's saying Algae Barn in the comment section. I believe that Algae Barn do a specific batch of copepods that do eat dinoflagellates, and it will take a while for them to build up a big enough population to eat them all. If you've got loads of them, that's a good way. I believe some people also black out the tank, but I'd rather just, if you've got corals and stuff like that in there, it's best not to to mess with things too much, like raising the temperature. I don't know what you've got in your tank, but it's best not to mess with things too much and try to use, like tiger pods, there you go, a natural source of a natural. If you can solve a problem naturally, and whatever the solution to the problem isn't going to cause you any trouble, then it's well worth doing it that way. And then Chris said, I'm going to be placing an order this week. What's the earliest for delivery on Friday? Earliest I can do would be Tuesday evening. I'm going to be placing an order this week. What's the latest time for delivery? I'm dyslexic, by the way, which is why it sounds like I'm like an idiot when I'm reading. This is why I hate doing live streams by myself, because there's so many comment sections. And when I do a live stream with Reef Talk, it's like I've got my own personal comment section reader butler who who reads the comments for me, so I don't look like an idiot. Where was it? I'm going to place an order this week. What's the latest time for delivery on Friday? So delivery for all my orders is before 1 p.m. So it's they go with Royal Mail, so you can't do. I can't specifically tell them to deliver late on a specific day. I can only guarantee before 1 p.m. on Monday Tuesday to Friday. I don't usually post on a Saturday because it's more expensive, but if people want to pay the additional cost, then I don't mind posting on Saturday. But you do have to accept the risk that the corals are all packed for a 48-hour delay. So if they don't arrive on the first day, they will arrive on the second day, and they're usually 99% of the time fine. Very so often I have had it where they've arrived on the second day. The only time I ever get coral deaths is if they don't actually arrive on time, and that very rarely happens. And even then, people are what usually happens is if the next time someone puts an order in, I just replace the coral free of charge. So yeah, it's if you obviously want to discuss that more, now is probably not the time, but I'm more than happy to talk to you on Facebook or Instagram. Right, I have a spare Audio Technica 2020 Plus. What camera do you use to take pictures for your farm? Do you use a lens? The cameras I use are literally my iPhone. That's all I use. I am the most basic YouTuber there is. I don't have any fancy equipment. I use my iPhone. I use a clip-in mic and for recording videos, and I use one of those D&D lenses, and that's it. I don't adjust the pictures. I literally use the lights are on blue, and I use a coral lens. And let's put it this way, if you have an iPhone and you put your lights on blue and you put the yellow and orange lens on, and you take a picture, it will be exactly the same. There's no adjusting it. There's no tweaking it to make it look slightly better or bring out certain things. I barely even take good pictures, let alone try and make them look better by adjusting them. It's not, you can quite often tell that some pictures are edited, especially if you look at what is around the coral. So if you have a white egg crate and the egg crate isn't white in the picture, then the picture's been edited. Usually it has like a pink hue to it or a purple hue, depending on how it's been adjusted. So that's a good thing to look out for when you're buying coral, because people oversaturate them to make them look better, but then people don't come back, because if they buy a coral and it doesn't look like how they think it's going to look, you might have made one sale, but you've lost every other sale that person would have bought. And I think the record holder for sales for a single person, I think one person has bought 18 boxes from me, which if you think about it, that's amazing. It's amazing that one person has bought from me 18 times. I have quite a few like very regular customers, but 18 seems excessive. I've not even bought 18 corals from shops probably in the last 2 years. It still amazes me that people are that they're interested in what I do, but it's I don't think that will ever get old. I don't think even now for me, this is what's weird. You won't understand this. I'm currently just sitting in my living room, just talking to a microphone, talking to no one. There's no one here, and it's a really odd thing. It takes a while to get used to, and you'll notice that I don't look at the camera very often. I'm quite often looking down or away or whatever. But I actually do that when I meet you face to face. For some reason, I don't look at people in the eyes very often. Apparently, it means you can't trust me. It's but it's even now. See, I'm not looking. I'm not looking at the camera. But yeah, it's just, let's put it this way. If anyone walked in now and didn't know what I was doing, or my neighbours could see me through the window, they'd be like, "That guy is so odd." We did get the large starfish. Oh, where did you get the last starfish shown in the video a few weeks ago? I bought that ages ago from a Maidenhead Aquatics in Crawley. I think it cost about £90. I think you don't see them that often. It took me a long time to get one. They're obviously quite a desirable invertebrate, so I think they usually go pretty quick. These are all over the surface. I've added pods from Algae Galaxy. Oh, let's just say, hoping that will help. These are all over the surfaces. I've added pods from Algae. If you message me, Jeremy, on Facebook or Instagram, we might be able to go through. Now, I don't do this for most people, but anyone who is kind enough to send a super chat is I'll help you out. So if you send me a message, I might not be able to sort of solve it immediately. Obviously, it's nighttime now here, but I will. I'll go through with you. Just I'll need to know certain things: your parameters, how long your tank's been going, your photo period, things like that. So don't message me going, "Hi, I was the one who messaged you on the." Send me all the details so I can look at it all in one go, and then I'll have a look. I'm not far from you. Do you want me to sit opposite so you feel comfortable on the stream? Les, if anything, that would make me feel more uncomfortable because then there's me talking to a computer, and then there's just this guy who I don't know who you are staring at me across the top of the computer. I'm not sure that is that's a good idea. I love doing the live streams with Alex because they are really they're quite involved, and you realize you go off on a tangent and you never have to. You do feel he's naked from the waist down. See, Reef Dog knows. He knows exactly. So it's when are you bringing out the Pablo plushie? I've not had enough people who want it yet, so not yet. What camera are you using for the farm? I used my iPhone. Wait a minute, that's what I answered, isn't it? What camera are you using for the farm? Do you use lens filters? Everything. Wait a minute. Where? I'm sure I saw another question for you. Oh yeah. What caused the coral to go 2 times? I've had a purple branching Montipora start sprouting green branches. Looks awesome, but wasn't bought like this. Corals will grow differently in different environments. One of the most famous ones I have is that I bought, and Reef Dog will know what I'm saying now. I bought a blue acro, big blue acro. It's probably like this big from Reef Dog. And for whatever reason, that big blue acro is now a big green. Well, it's not big anymore. It's been cut up. It's now a green acro with blue tips. Now, the lighting in my tanks is much lower than Reef Dog's. Reef Dog has his set quite high. So I think that is probably what caused it. Isn't that how? Yeah. Reef Dog has his light set quite high, whereas mine are a bit dimmer. So I think the difference in coloration is probably because of that. But there could be a whole number of things which caused it. So it's difficult to say what causes a coral, what causes a coral to be different. I know what causes a coral to die. Everyone wants. Okay, so if everyone wants these Pablo plushies so much, someone find me a place to get one made, and I'll make them. I'll get them made for you. Reef Dog, you got to buy at least 5 of them. You got to put them in the. What Reef Dog needs to do, you need to buy one and put it behind you during your live stream, because obviously when people watch your live stream, they don't know what you're going to talk about. So you need to have a background that makes people know what you're talking about, like me. So and for those people that didn't know, Reef Dog mentioned in his last live stream that he bought all these fish things so people knew what he was going to talk about. And I was like, why? What took 2 minutes? I don't know what took 2 minutes. We want Pablo. There was one question. I've lost track of where I was. Actually, he didn't know who he was in Reef Aquatics. It was great. I actually met him once, but didn't know who he was in Reef Aquatics. Oh, so Les met Reef Dog, or Les let me. Oh, it's. I met someone today who actually, when I was in Reef Aquatics, that oh, it was me. You're not the person I met today, are you? It's possible that it's. I've met lots of people. It's difficult for me to know know which one who you are, Les. I'm afraid. But let's put it this way: if ever there was one person I was going to have sitting opposite me, if that ever happens, I'll let it be you, Liz. Whilst you have, I can set my into slave labor making paper. Yes, do that. Whilst we have you alone and Reef Dog isn't here, can we have side by side biceps? No. Why do people want to keep seeing behind Reef Dog's biceps? It's so odd. It's like the two people with the least exciting biceps. Now Reef Dog's saying gun show. Look, I said you'd have 15 minutes, and you've kept me for another half an hour. So, unless anyone has anything specifically of interest to say or ask me for the last 20 minutes, I'm probably going to go. So, top 100 corals. How delayed is your flight? It's very difficult to say what my top corals are. I like Trachophilias. I actually really like Trachophilias. They're definitely like my favorites. I don't like Scollies. Don't like Scollies really at all. People that usually shocks people. I have no interest in torches. It's easier for me to tell you all the corals I don't like more than the corals I do like. What do I like? I like corals for different reasons. So Cephastrias grow fast, and Leptoceras grow fast, and Lithophyllum grow fast. They're interesting. They're colourful, and and I can sell them. I like those corals. So there you go. There's another 4 of your top 100. I would definitely say a Trachophilia would be my favourite. Yeah, I'd put a big Trachophilia. You go through stages, so maybe Trachophilias won't be my favorite soon. At one point, I used to love mushroom corals. I loved bounce mushrooms. I don't know why I loved them. Maybe they're rarity, maybe because other people didn't have them. It was just if I could get hold of them, I wanted them. So that was something I used to do. Someone's asked actually quite an interesting question, which is why I paused. It says, any tips on buying your first tank breakdown? You will need a lot more. If it's your first one, start with something small. Start with a small tank first. You'll need a lot more buckets and things than you think you need. The best thing to do is get these big, what are they? Like those plastic tubs that people put all their kids' junk in, like storage boxes. Get those. You'll need a big car that can hold them all, and you'll need to have some duct tape because those boxes will leak, and then you'll get like coral slime and everything everywhere. But the best thing you just need to try and prepare for everything. Try and get as much information as you can before. Don't try and keep the live rock wet if you're not planning to keep it. And even if you are planning to keep it, you don't need to keep it wet. So don't try and move it. Corals obviously do need to be kept wet, and try and plan it out before you get there. So try and plan. So if you've seen pictures and you know what corals, plan what corals are going to go in what boxes, and because remember you can't put things on top of each other. Or if you are putting the live rock in the boxes, put the live rock on the bottom, because obviously naturally the first thing you want to do, take all the corals out and you put them all in, and then the base rock is all rock, and then you go, what do I do with this? So try and rebuild it in the boxes. But the thing that you need to remember, get a second person to go with you as well. That's really useful, and it's so much more hard work than you think it's going to be. But once you've done it, it's well worth it. I'd like to know where to put my Cephastria. My Cephastria seem to like sort of mid to low light, and Cephastrias will even grow under the tray, so they don't need an awful lot of light. And that's where. Although I saw a picture. Oh no, that wasn't your Cephastria. It was Foxy Reefer's Cephastria I saw the other day. Where'd you get the artwork from? I think it was from a company called The Wall Stylist, which you could just Google. The pictures aren't expensive, but if you want, the frames and The white bit that goes around it is what makes it expensive, or more expensive than I wanted to pay. Let's put it that way. I'm bidding on a Red Sea reefer. That's obviously related to something else. Ryan, you stopped me nearly paying lots of money for a bounce mushroom that wasn't a bounce mushroom. Yes, that's another thing that people do all the time. If you're buying from people that are not reputable people, they're just hobbyists. Some of them are reputable, obviously, but if you're buying from people that are hobbyists, it's not unusual for people to try to sell something as something else. That is 100% for sure. And as Les said in the comment section, Les must have emailed me a long time ago saying, is this a bounce mushroom? Or is this specific type of bounce mushroom? Because he was going to buy it. And I went, that's not a bounce mushroom. And then he didn't buy it. There are different types of bounce mushroom. There's different things which make different bounce mushrooms valuable. There are specific, there's like 4, I think, specific named ones which have been cultivated. And then there are some wild ones. And the wild ones are not worth anywhere near as much as the cultivated ones. The cultivated ones are almost like celebrity ones, whereas the wild ones are just a freak of nature. So, and quite often the wild ones actually lose that bounce, the little bubble on them. It's not unusual for them to lose it. So you can end up paying a lot of money for redactus, because that's all they all are, which ends up having no bubbles on it. So yes, what's your view on lava rock and lava sand for a reef display? I'm toying with the idea to make the colors pop. If I wouldn't do it personally, I don't know what the properties of lava rock are for a reef tank. Some rocks have make the water more stable. I don't know if lava rock will do that for you. And if this is, I'm assuming it's not your first reef tank, but if it is your first reef tank, you want to make it as easy as possible. But I have seen people use black sand before. I've never seen people use lava rock, as far as I know. But I've actually got live rock, not live anymore, but like dead live rock from the ocean, like, you know, the OG, the original stuff. And I will never sell it because it just sits in my garden. Don't come and steal it now that you know it sits in my garden. It just sits in my garden, it gets rained on, and then gradually, obviously, the rain flows through it, and eventually all the phosphates will be, Pucani, that's what it is. You can't get it anymore. In fact, you can't really get much of anything other than man-made rock anymore, which to some extent is a good thing, but it definitely makes a very, very different reef tank, I think. It definitely, there is, my opinion, this is just an opinion, there is a big difference between the old school methods of live rock or Pucani rock, whether it's dry or live, and the newer, the man-made live rocks. And I don't know if I would. Let's put it this way: the next tank I start, I will be using the old live rock I had, the OG proper stuff. And James says I've never seen live rock in a shop. It's almost like they don't do it anymore. I think they can get it somehow, but it's really expensive now, and people don't want to buy it. So I've never used Marco Rock myself. Like I say, it's easy to get, but it's not cheap. It's I just like the original rock, even though it's dead, so it's just white now. It looks more natural. It's really porous. I like the idea of some of the man-made ones, you know, where they're like sprayed with things and stuff. I liked it at first, and just after probably about 6 months, all the paint wears off, so it just looks like a normal rock anyway. And it's not, in my opinion, it's not as porous. In fact, it's not. That's not an opinion. It's just not as porous as the original rock. Do people not want it because of pest risks? It is not flavored anymore. Why is it not flavored? No, I actually think it came down to that it's not as easy to get hold of live rock anymore. I think some countries banned its export. I don't know, but it's definitely not something that is readily available as much anymore. Pests are an issue, but if I had a choice of live rock over over the man-made rock, I'd probably get live rock again. Yeah, see, banned from export. There you go. Yeah, I would definitely do it again. I was incredibly lucky when I first started because I didn't really know what I was doing, and I bought live rock from second hand from another person's tank, and it was covered in algae, not green hair algae, like the good stuff, like coralline, and it had like red patches that it was algae. It wasn't cyanobacteria. It was it was really high quality live rock I bought, but I didn't know that I didn't know now. I didn't know then what I know now, that I bought some really good stuff basically, and I just got incredibly lucky because I never ever not once did I ever have an Aptasia in my 1,000 litre tank or the Red Sea tank, to be honest. And obviously sometimes corals come in with them on the coral farm. It's almost impossible to. It's just about managing them and cutting them off when you can. But when they're out of the water and they're all sucked in, you can't see everything. So the next day you'll go through, see if there's any Aptasia, take them back out, cut them off again. But yeah, I was incredibly lucky with the first live rock I got. I had a pretty easy ride. I had no pests at all that I couldn't. Maybe no pests I could have identified at the time. And I just, the cycle for that tank was so good. It just, everything went so smooth. There was hardly any bad, there was no sort of bad cycle. Or ugly phase. There was a minor ugly phase, but not a lot. Not compared to a sterile tank. That was like, whew, I did not know what hit me when I had a sterile tank and cycled it. And that's the difference these days. So a lot of people are they are getting into the hobby. They're having a sterile tank because that's the way it's done, and they're being hit by this massive ugly phase, and they're not prepared for it. And it's unlike anything they'd ever expected. And old school reefers, and I'm not an old school reefer. I'm like a mid old school reefer, because I remember when protein skimmers weren't cones. I remember when that you could buy live rock. I remember I found out that you can't get coral catfish anymore. Coral catfish are banned because they're considered an invasive species. I remember you could just buy them. I remember when torch corals cost hardly any money. I remember that when there was only green torch corals and there was only green Trachyphilias, and I remember when yellow tangs were £25. So I am almost an old school reefer, but not really. The true old school reefers are obviously a lot older than that. Would there be a market for cultured man-made rock? I think there are. There is a company in Fiji. I think Walt Smith. I think has a company which is culturing man-made live rock. But I think it all depends on what it's made of. I have an outbreak of snails. I do collect natural seawater. Do you think these 110s of jerks are zapping my KH? Unlikely, if I'm honest, but I don't know enough about your system to know that. So it's difficult, but I'd say it was unlikely. In my opinion, it's worth having recently sold 20 kilos of cycle covered in coral algae. It was a pain in the bloody ass. What was that question? So he's okay. Yeah, reef and rock sell cultured rock. Do you have any fish left on your wish list? The only fish that I've always wanted to keep is a large angelfish. I don't know what it will be. I've always wanted an annularis. Always wanted an annularis. But if I did a specific series on an angelfish, an annularis just feels like it's not exciting enough, if I'm honest. But then that's it. Am I building a tank for me, or am I building it for you? Reef Dogs just said, how's the angelfish tank plan coming along? Well, when I found out the electricity prices were going up again, it kind of stalled my plans, because my electricity was over £1,000. I'm not sure I haven't had the bill yet, so I didn't know what time that's for. They just sent me a thing saying you owe us £1,000. So if you're all moaning about your electricity bill, wait till you have 36 radions, and then you'll know what it feels like. Yes, the angelfish tank is on hold until I know, until the electricity prices are stabilized. I don't want to just go crazy. I don't want to get things to get out of hand. And I've even prepared, if for whatever reason, look, there should be no reason to do this, but if for whatever reason things like escalated, and I couldn't sell enough coral to cover the cost of electricity, which would be crazy, all I would do is I would close down one of the systems, the smaller of the two systems, and keep less pieces of all the corals. So at the moment, some of the corals I've got 20 or 30 pieces for, but if I just kept 10 pieces of each of them rather than 20 or 30, I can condense them down into one system, which would significantly reduce, would basically half the running costs. And with regards to Reef Dog's question, have I done anything to reduce the cost or reduce the temperature of the coral farm? The coral farm was built specifically using some of the most energy efficient equipment. It is very, very heavily insulated, and the only thing that I think of that I could do would be possibly drop the tank temperature down. It's already slightly low, it's 25.5, it could go down to 25. But other than that, there's not really a lot that I could do to save money unless I took, without actually closing down one of the systems. But that would be a very, very long way off. There would have to be some serious problems with the industry for me to do that. And what's interesting is the industry is actually starting to pick back up again. This is a very seasonal hobby. People stop buying in the summer, and then they start buying again in the autumn and winter. And there is usually a lull around Christmas, and then January, when people are recovering from Christmas, they don't buy as much. And then in February, it gets much better again until sort of like May, and then it gets quieter for a few months over. There's always a small drip coming in, but there's certain months which are much bigger than others. So the big months are coming now. They're going to be soon. So it'll be interesting to see what it's like then, to see how much of an impact the is it the weather and the fact that this is a very seasonal hobby, or that's reducing the sales, or is it the fact that the electricity is going up, people want to save money, people are selling their tanks? Is that what's causing a reduction in sales? Because there has been a reduction in sales, but similarly, my enthusiasm for the company has fallen the same way that your enthusiasm for your tank has fallen. The difference is, if you don't clean the glass, then it doesn't matter. If I don't sell too much, if I don't sell enough coral, then I can't pay my mortgage. So it swings and roundabouts, similar, but it definitely is. I was amazed because every single year, I've had it for obviously for 14 years now. In the summer, you let things slide. You don't do the glass as much. You do less water changes. You don't go to the fish shop as much. You want to spend your money going out and partying and being on the beach and things like that. It's exactly the same when you own it as a company. And it's also, you get less sales, which means you've lost momentum, and the loss of momentum means you're less enthusiastic, and because you're less enthusiastic, you then don't do as much to sell, and it's a continuous cycle basically. But already, even just in this last week, there has been a significant uptick of sales, which has started to motivate me again. So, and it should be the other way around. I should be more motivated by less sales to get more sales again. But it's 100% a seasonal thing. So if you're thinking, do I really want the tank at the moment, or am I not? I'm not that interested, or I've lost a little piece of the excitement. Trust me, give it a month if that's what you're thinking now, or give it 2 months, and I guarantee you that you'll probably start to get that feeling again. And that exact same information applies to if you have a tank crash. If you have a tank crash, the almost immediate thing that everyone wants to do is shut their tank down. They go, I've had it, I'm done, I spent all this money, I've lost all this money, I'm done. Well, every tank crash I've ever had, and I've had 2. Yeah, I think it's 2 significant ones. I said exactly that. I went, I'm done, I'm not doing it anymore. And then what happened was, each time I upgraded. I went, nope, leave it for a month, leave everything as it is, leave all the dead coral, like don't leave, like if it's gonna get worse, don't leave it. But I left all the dead coral skeletons in there, just left it, and then I came back a month later. Obviously I was still maintaining it, but a month later, and then all of a sudden one day you go through, you take all the dead coral skeletons off, and all of a sudden that instantly makes you feel better. And then although you can do that initially, sometimes you're too like upset. And we do get attached to our animals, whether they're fish or coral. So, but yeah, just if you think you want to sell your tank, the best thing to do, leave it for a month, and then see if you still want to sell it. Anyway, we have reached the 2-hour mark, and now that we've reached 2-hour mark, I have no doubt that Reef Talk is going to ask some other really, really long question to try and keep me here. But I am not. It's not going to work this time. So it has been. Hello, he's just laughing. It has been a pleasure. Reef Talk, are we doing it? Are we doing a live stream next week? We'll get this confirmed now. My flight has been called. Thanks, Ryan. Oh, there you go. Look at that. Yes. Okay. So there you go. It looks like Reef Talk and I will be doing a live stream next week. Hopefully by then, I should probably invest in a proper camera if I'm going to do this regularly. But obviously, thank you all for joining me. And yeah, if anyone, enjoy your evening, and I will see you next time.